To our amazing viewers at Cheating Tales Lab, welcome and thank you. Your presence makes these stories worth sharing. We'd love to hear, which part of the world are you joining us from? Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, Homecoming. Staff Sergeant Connor Walsh stepped off the military transport at Fort Bragg, his desert fatigues still carrying the dust of Afghanistan. 24 months of his second deployment had etched new lines around his steel-gray eyes and added a permanent tension to his jaw. At 32, Connor was a decorated intelligence specialist who'd spent his military career in shadows, gathering information, analyzing threats, and eliminating problems before they became disasters. The drive to his suburban Charlotte home felt longer than usual. Connor's mind wandered to Lauren, his wife of 8 years, and their twins Emma and Tyler, now 13. He'd missed Tyler's 8th grade graduation and Emma's first school dance. The guilt gnawed at him, but service demanded sacrifice. Lauren knew this when she married him. Connor pulled into his driveway at 18:47 hours, old habits died hard. The house looked different. Lauren's Honda was gone, replaced by a black BMW he didn't recognize. New landscaping adorned the front yard, and expensive outdoor furniture sat on a renovated patio. His modest military salary couldn't afford such upgrades. Inside, the house felt foreign. Designer furniture replaced their humble living room set. A 75-inch television dominated the wall where their family photos once hung. Those photos now lay in a cardboard box beside the front door, his first clue that something was catastrophically wrong. Lauren? Connor's voice echoed through the empty house. No response. He climbed the stairs, muscle memory guiding him to their bedroom. The master suite had been completely redecorated in expensive fabrics and modern fixtures. On the nightstand sat a framed photo of Lauren with a man Connor didn't recognize, a tall, well-dressed stranger with perfectly styled hair and an expensive watch. Connor's training kicked in. He methodically searched the house, cataloging every change, every new purchase, every missing memory. In Tyler's room, he found school reports he'd never seen. Emma's walls displayed awards and certificates from competitions he'd missed. His children had lived entire chapters of their lives without him. The garage contained the biggest shock. Lauren's Honda sat beside a motorcycle and expensive tools. But it was the small details that triggered his analytical mind, oil stains in 2 specific patterns, indicating 2 vehicles regularly parked there. Fresh tire tracks in the driveway showed a heavy vehicle, likely the BMW, had been there recently. Connor sat in his old recliner, the only piece of furniture Lauren hadn't replaced, and opened his laptop. His military intelligence background had taught him that information was power, and he needed to understand what had happened to his family. Within 30 minutes, he'd accessed public records, social media profiles, and financial databases. Lauren's Facebook page told the story. Photos spanning the past 18 months showed her with Dylan Reed, a 35-year-old commercial real estate developer. They attended charity galas, expensive restaurants, and weekend trips to Asheville. The photos progressed from casual friendship to intimate moments, her hand on his chest, his arm around her waist, and finally, passionate kisses at what appeared to be New Year's Eve celebrations. The financial records painted a clearer picture. Lauren had opened a joint checking account with Dylan 6 months ago. Large deposits from Reed Development LLC funded the home renovations, new car payments, and private school tuition for the twins. Dylan Reed hadn't just stolen Connor's wife, he'd replaced Connor as provider and father figure. Connor's phone buzzed with a text from Lauren, "We need to talk. Coffee tomorrow at 10 a.m. Brugger's on Providence Road." He studied the message, noting her clinical tone and choice of public location. Lauren was planning something, and she wanted witnesses. Connor's military instincts recognized the tactical advantage of controlling the battlefield. She'd chosen her ground carefully. That night, Connor didn't sleep. Instead, he sat in his darkened living room, processing the betrayal while his mind began constructing possibilities. Lauren had made critical errors, she'd underestimated the skills Connor had developed in 2 decades of military service. She'd forgotten that he was trained to identify threats, gather intelligence, and neutralize enemies. By dawn, Connor had made his decision. This wasn't just adultery or divorce, this was war. And wars had casualties. Chapter 2, The Enemy Revealed. Connor arrived at Brugger's early, selecting a corner table with clear sightlines to all entrances. Old habits. He'd been analyzing Dylan Reed since 3 a.m., using resources most civilians couldn't access. Military intelligence networks had taught him that everyone had vulnerabilities, you just needed to know where to look. Dylan Reed was a success story on paper. Reed Development LLC had constructed several high-end shopping centers and residential communities around Charlotte. His company employed 43 people and maintained a pristine public image. Reed served on the boards of 2 local charities and had been featured in Charlotte Business Journal as 40 under 40. But Connor saw deeper. Reed's ex-wife Jessica had filed 3 domestic violence reports, all mysteriously dropped. His business partner had died in a suspicious car accident 2 years ago, leaving Reed as sole owner of previously shared properties. Most interesting was Reed's pattern with married women. Lauren was his 4th known affair with a military spouse. Lauren entered precisely at 10 a.m., wearing a dress Connor had never seen and jewelry that cost more than his monthly salary. She looked radiant, confident, and completely transformed from the woman he'd married. Dylan followed 30 seconds behind, a tactical formation that showed they'd planned this encounter carefully. Connor. Lauren's voice carried no warmth. This is Dylan Reed. Dylan extended his hand with practiced charm. Connor, I've heard so much about you. Thank you for your service. Connor studied Dylan's grip, firm but not aggressive, manicured nails, expensive watch, soft hands that had never seen real work. Everything about Dylan screamed privilege and entitlement. Connor filed away every detail while maintaining neutral expression. Lauren says you two need to discuss some things, Dylan continued, his tone suggesting he was mediating a business transaction. We do. Lauren slid a manila envelope across the table. Divorce papers. I've already signed them. Connor opened the envelope methodically, his expression unchanged as he read. Lauren wanted everything, the house, primary custody of the twins, alimony, and half his military pension. The papers cited abandonment and emotional neglect as grounds for divorce. You abandoned us for war, Lauren said, her voice rising slightly. The kids barely know you. Dylan has been more of a father to them in 18 months than you've been in 13 years. Connor looked up from the papers. The twins live here now. They live with me and Dylan. In the house Dylan renovated. He pays for their private school, their clothes, their activities. He's been the stable male presence they needed. And my opinion on this arrangement?
Dylan leaned forward. Connor, we're trying to handle this maturely. The kids are happy, Lauren's happy, and frankly, military life doesn't seem compatible with family responsibilities. Maybe it's time to let them move forward. Connor studied Dylan's face, noting micro-expressions his training had taught him to recognize. Confidence masked by underlying nervousness. Guilt hidden behind practiced charm. Dylan Reed was performing, playing a role he'd rehearsed. I'd like to see the twins, Connor said quietly. They're at school, Lauren replied quickly. Besides, we think it's better if transitions happen gradually. Maybe supervised visits at first. Supervised by whom? My attorney thinks. Your attorney. Connor folded the papers precisely. And who's paying for this attorney? Lauren's cheeks flushed. Dylan is helping with legal expenses. Because he wants to adopt my children? The silence stretched uncomfortably. Dylan reached across the table and took Lauren's hand, a possessive gesture meant to establish dominance. Connor, Dylan said, I know this is difficult, but Lauren and the kids have found stability and happiness. Fighting this will only hurt everyone, especially Emma and Tyler. Connor stood slowly, pocketing the divorce papers. I'll need time to review these documents with my own attorney. Of course, Lauren said, relief evident in her voice. We're not unreasonable. Connor looked directly at Dylan. What exactly is your business, Mr. Reed? Commercial real estate development. Shopping centers, residential communities, some luxury properties. Successful business? Very. Dylan's chest puffed slightly. Reed Development has 32 projects completed and 8 more in development. Impressive. Connor's tone remained neutral. Must require significant financial backing. We have excellent relationships with investors and banks. Connor nodded once. I'll be in touch. He walked away without another word, leaving Lauren and Dylan at their table. Through the window, he watched them celebrate. Lauren's relieved laughter, Dylan's triumphant smile, their casual intimacy that spoke of victory assumed. They had no idea they'd just provided Connor with everything he needed to destroy them both. That afternoon, Connor drove to his twins' private school. He watched from his car as Emma and Tyler emerged at dismissal time. They looked healthy and happy, but they climbed into Dylan's BMW without looking around for their father. Dylan ruffled Tyler's hair and kissed Emma's forehead, familiar gestures that spoke of established relationships. Connor's jaw tightened as he watched his children drive away with another man. Lauren had been busy during his deployment, systematically replacing him in every aspect of their lives. But she'd made one critical error. She'd assumed Connor would accept defeat gracefully. That night, Connor began phase 1 of his plan. He wasn't just going to fight the divorce. He was going to destroy everyone who'd betrayed him. Lauren, Dylan, and anyone who'd helped them steal his family would learn that Staff Sergeant Connor Walsh never forgot a slight and never forgave a betrayal. War had been declared. Now it was time to choose the battlefield. Chapter 3, The Court Gambit. 3 months later, Connor sat in the Mecklenburg County Family Court, wearing his dress blues uniform. The choice was deliberate. Every ribbon, every medal, every indication of service designed to remind everyone present that he'd sacrificed for his country while his wife destroyed his family. Lauren and Dylan occupied the plaintiff's table with attorney Patricia Morrison, a shark in expensive suits who specialized in military divorces. They'd spared no expense on legal representation, clearly confident in their position. Lauren wore pearls and a conservative dress that projected wholesome motherhood. Dylan had traded his flashy wardrobe for a subdued business suit that suggested stable provider. Judge William Hoffer called the court to session. Connor had researched Hoffer extensively, a former Marine who'd served 2 tours in Vietnam before becoming a prosecutor and eventually a judge. If anyone would understand military sacrifice, it would be Hoffer. Attorney Morrison rose first. Your Honor, this case represents a tragic but clear situation. Mrs. Walsh has been essentially abandoned by her husband for military deployments totaling 4 years of their 8-year marriage. The children, Emma and Tyler Walsh, barely know their father and have bonded with Mr. Dylan Reed, who has provided stability, financial support, and paternal guidance during their father's extended absences. Morrison presented evidence methodically, school records showing Dylan attending parent-teacher conferences, medical records with Dylan listed as emergency contact, photos of family activities featuring Dylan instead of Connor. She painted a picture of abandonment so complete that divorce seemed inevitable. Mrs. Walsh seeks primary custody of the children, who currently live in the family home renovated and maintained by Mr. Reed. She requests alimony of $4,000 monthly and 50% of Sergeant Walsh's military pension. Given Sergeant Walsh's history of abandonment, supervised visitation seems appropriate initially. Lauren took the stand first, her testimony rehearsed and emotional. She spoke of lonely nights, missed birthdays, children asking where their father was. She described Dylan as a godsend who'd filled the void Connor's service had created. I never wanted this, Lauren said, tears precisely timed. But the children need stability. They need a father figure who's actually present. Dylan's testimony came next, painting himself as reluctant hero who'd only wanted to help a struggling family. He detailed his financial contributions, $23,000 in home renovations, private school tuition, clothing, activities. He spoke lovingly of Emma and Tyler, describing inside jokes and shared experiences that Connor had missed. I never intended to replace their father, Dylan said solemnly. But children need guidance and support. When Sergeant Walsh was deployed, someone had to fill that role. Judge Hoffer listened impassively, occasionally taking notes. When Morrison finished presenting the plaintiff's case, he looked toward Connor's table. Sergeant Walsh, do you have representation? Connor stood alone. I'll be representing myself, Your Honor. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Lauren and Dylan exchanged glances, They'd assumed Connor couldn't afford quality legal representation. "Your Honor," Connor said, his voice carrying the authority of 2 decades in uniform. "I've listened to testimony describing me as an absent father who abandoned his family for military service. I've heard Mr. Reed characterized as a heroic figure who rescued my wife and children from my neglect." Connor moved to the center of the courtroom, his presence commanding attention. "I won't dispute the facts as presented. I was deployed for 24 months during a critical period in my children's lives. I missed birthdays, graduations, and day-to-day moments that matter. Military service requires sacrifice, not just from service members, but from their families." Judge Hoffer leaned forward slightly. "However," Connor continued, "I believe this court is being presented with incomplete information about the nature of this divorce and the people seeking to remove my children from my custody." Lauren's attorney stood. "Objection, Your Honor. Sergeant Walsh is making arguments without presenting evidence." Sustained. "Do you have evidence to present, Sergeant Walsh?" Connor reached into his briefcase and withdrew a manila envelope. "I do, Your Honor." He approached the bench and handed the envelope to Judge Hoffer. "I believe this information is relevant to determining what's truly in the best interest of Emma and Tyler Walsh." Judge Hoffer opened the envelope and began reading. His expression changed immediately, eyes widening, jaw tightening, color draining from his face. He read for several minutes while the courtroom waited in tense silence. "Ms. Morrison," Judge Hoffer said finally, his voice sharp, "did you conduct background investigations on your clients?" "Of course, Your Honor. Standard due diligence was." "Did you investigate Mr. Reed's business practices and personal history?" Morrison glanced nervously at Dylan, who had gone pale. "We focused on establishing Mr. Reed's current stability and financial capability." Judge Hoffer studied the documents again. "Sergeant Walsh, where did you obtain this information?" "Through legal channels available to military intelligence personnel, Your Honor. I followed all applicable laws and regulations." "Your Honor," Morrison interjected, "we object to any evidence obtained through." "Case dismissed immediately," Judge Hoffer announced, his voice cutting through the courtroom like a blade. Lauren screamed. "What? No, you can't." 2 FBI agents entered the courtroom from the rear doors, moving with purpose toward Dylan Reed. The lead agent, a woman in her 40s with short blonde hair, approached Dylan's table. "Dylan Reed, you're under arrest for money laundering, wire fraud, and operating an illegal gambling enterprise. You have the right to remain silent." Dylan tried to stand, but stumbled backward. "This is a mistake. I haven't done anything." Lauren grabbed at Dylan's arm as the agents handcuffed him. "This isn't happening. Connor, what did you do?" The second FBI agent, a tall black man with graying temples, approached Lauren. "Ma'am, you'll need to come with us for questioning regarding your knowledge of Mr. Reed's illegal activities and your potential participation in money laundering through joint financial accounts." "I don't know anything about any crimes," Lauren shouted, but she was already being escorted from the courtroom. Judge Hoffer banged his gavel repeatedly as chaos erupted. Spectators whispered frantically, attorneys shuffled papers, and court officers moved to restore order. "Clear the courtroom," Judge Hoffer commanded. "Sergeant Walsh, remain for conference." When the courtroom emptied except for Connor and the judge, Hoffer leaned back in his chair. "Son, what the hell did you just unleash?" Connor stood at attention. "Justice, Your Honor. Sometimes it requires patience." Judge Hoffer studied Connor for a long moment. "The FBI has been investigating Reed for 8 months?" "Yes, sir. I simply provided them with additional evidence and financial records that accelerated their timeline." "Evidence you gathered during your deployment?" "Evidence I gathered after discovering my family had been systematically replaced by a criminal, Your Honor." Judge Hoffer nodded slowly. "The divorce petition is dismissed. Custody remains with you pending investigation of Mrs. Walsh's involvement." "But Sergeant Walsh," he fixed Connor with a stern look. "This is just the beginning, isn't it?" Connor's smile was cold and predatory. "Yes, Your Honor, it is." As Connor left the courthouse, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Dad? It's Emma. Where are Mom and Dylan?" The war had just begun, and Connor Walsh had fired the opening shot. But victory would require much more than exposing Dylan's crimes. It would require destroying everyone who'd betrayed him, completely and permanently. Chapter 4: The Investigation. Connor sat across from his twins in a sterile conference room at the Department of Social Services. Emma clutched a tissue while Tyler stared at the table, both confused and frightened by the sudden chaos that had engulfed their lives. 24 hours had passed since Dylan's arrest and Lauren's detention for questioning. "Dad," Emma said quietly, "what's happening to Mom?" Connor studied his daughter's face, seeing Lauren's features mixed with his own stubborn jawline. At 13, Emma was old enough to understand complexity, but young enough to believe in simple answers. "Your mother made some poor choices, sweetheart. She's helping the FBI understand what she knew about Dylan's business activities." Tyler finally looked up. "Dylan said you abandoned us. He said military people don't make good fathers." The words hit Connor like shrapnel, but his expression remained steady. Dylan had been poisoning his children against him for months, systematically replacing him in their affections. The manipulation ran deeper than adultery. It was psychological warfare against children. "What do you think, Tyler? Do you believe I abandoned you?" Tyler's young face scrunched in confusion. "I don't know. You were always gone. Dylan took me to baseball practice and helped with homework. He bought me a bike and taught me to change oil in his motorcycle." Connor nodded. "Those are important things. Did Dylan ever talk about me? About why I was deployed?" "He said soldiers go overseas because they like fighting more than their families," Emma answered. "He said you could have gotten a different job if you really cared." Connor felt rage building, but kept his voice calm. Dylan hadn't just stolen his wife. He'd systematically destroyed his children's respect and love. This wasn't just adultery. It was calculated psychological abuse designed to permanently sever family bonds. "Let me tell you what I actually do," Connor said. "I gather information to keep Americans safe. Sometimes that means traveling to dangerous places so threats never reach American soil. While I was in Afghanistan, I helped prevent 3 terrorist attacks that would have killed innocent people." Tyler's eyes widened slightly. Really? My job kept you safe, but it also kept me away from baseball practices and homework help. That's the sacrifice military families make. We protect strangers so our own families can live in peace." Emma leaned forward. "But Dylan said." "Dylan lied about many things," Connor interrupted gently. "You'll understand more as the investigation continues." The door opened, and Special Agent Rebecca Torres entered. Connor had worked with Torres twice during joint military FBI operations, and she'd personally expedited the Reed investigation when Connor provided his evidence. "Connor, we need to discuss Mrs. Walsh's situation with the children present," Torres said, taking a seat. "Emma, Tyler, your mother is being released this afternoon. She's been cooperative, and we don't believe she was aware of Mr. Reed's criminal activities." Relief flooded Emma's face. "She's coming home? That's complicated," Torres continued. "Your home is currently part of our investigation. Mr. Reed funded the renovations with money from illegal gambling operations. We're seizing assets connected to his crimes." Tyler looked confused. "What does that mean?" Connor answered. "It means the house improvements, the furniture, possibly the car. Anything Dylan bought with illegal money becomes evidence." "But where will we live?" Emma asked. Torres glanced at Connor. "Your father has legal custody. The decision about living arrangements is his to make." Connor studied his children's faces. Emma looked hopeful but nervous. Tyler appeared angry and defiant. Loyalty to Dylan ran deeper than Connor had realized. These weren't just his children anymore. They were strangers shaped by 18 months of systematic manipulation. "We'll figure it out together," Connor said. "But first, I need you both to understand something important. Over the next few weeks, you're going to learn things about Dylan and your mother that might upset you. I want you to remember that none of this is your fault." Torres stood. "Connor, can I speak with you privately?" In the hallway, Torres pulled out a tablet displaying financial records. Lauren's story is partially true. She claims she didn't know about Reed's illegal gambling operation. But she definitely knew he was married when their affair started. Still married, separated, but not divorced. His wife Jessica has been in hiding for 6 months after Reed threatened her over alimony demands. Lauren knew because Jessica called the house looking for Reed twice while Lauren was living there. Connor absorbed this information. Lauren hadn't just committed adultery. She'd knowingly destroyed another woman's marriage. The pattern was becoming clearer. "There's more," Torres continued. "Reed has been targeting military spouses for 3 years. Always women whose husbands are deployed. Always expensive gifts and home improvements. always pressure to divorce, and give him access to military benefits and pensions. Premeditated. Absolutely. Lauren is victim number 4 that we know of. The previous 3 cases ended badly. One woman lost her children when Reed's criminal background surfaced. Another attempted suicide when she learned about his other affairs. And the third is in bankruptcy after Reed drained her accounts and disappeared. Connor felt ice forming in his chest. Lauren hadn't stumbled into an affair. She'd been targeted by a predator who specialized in destroying military families. But that didn't excuse her choices or the way she'd turned his children against him. What's Reed's current status? Connor asked. Bail denied. He's looking at 15 to 20 years on federal charges. His entire business empire was built on laundering gambling money through real estate transactions. We've frozen everything. And Lauren? Torres hesitated. She's technically a victim of fraud, but she's also an adulteress who potentially endangered her children by moving them in with a criminal. Family court will have to sort out custody issues. Connor nodded. When can I see her? She'll be at the house this afternoon collecting personal belongings under FBI supervision. You could meet her there. Connor returned to the conference room, where Emma and Tyler waited anxiously. Their world had collapsed in 24 hours, and they needed stability. But Connor wasn't ready to offer forgiveness or reconciliation. Lauren had chosen her path, and now she would face the consequences. Emma, Tyler, we're going home, Connor announced. Your mother will be there to collect some of her things. Is she moving back in? Emma asked hopefully. Connor met his daughter's eyes. No, sweetheart. She's not. As they walked to Connor's truck, Tyler stopped suddenly. Dad, are you going to send us away like Dylan said you would? Connor knelt to his son's eye level. Tyler, I will never abandon you or Emma. But I also won't pretend that everything is okay. Our family has been broken, and fixing it will take time and honesty. Are you willing to try? Tyler nodded reluctantly. Emma took her father's hand, the first voluntary physical contact she'd initiated since his return. Connor stood, studying his children's faces. They were damaged by months of manipulation, but they were still his. Lauren and Dylan had tried to steal everything from him, but they'd failed. Now came the harder task, rebuilding his family while ensuring that everyone who'd betrayed him paid the full price for their treachery. The war was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. Chapter 5, Revelations. Lauren sat in Connor's living room, their former living room, surrounded by cardboard boxes and FBI agents cataloging evidence. She looked fragile and defeated, a stark contrast to the confident woman who demanded everything in divorce court just days earlier. Connor entered with Emma and Tyler, who immediately ran to their mother. Lauren held them tightly, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry, she whispered repeatedly. I didn't know. I never meant for this to happen. Special Agent Torres approached Connor. We've identified $17,000 in illegal proceeds used for household improvements. The BMW is being impounded, along with jewelry and electronics purchased with Reed's money. Mrs. Walsh can keep personal items and anything purchased before the affair began. Connor surveyed the damage. His modest military home had been transformed into a crime scene. Chalk outlines on walls showed where expensive artwork had hung. Empty spaces marked where luxury furniture had been confiscated. The life Lauren and Dylan had built was literally disappearing before their eyes. Mom, Emma said tearfully, where will you live? Lauren glanced at Connor, hope flickering in her eyes. I don't know yet, sweetheart. Maybe your father and I can. No, Connor said quietly but firmly. We can't. Lauren's face crumpled. Connor, please. I know I made mistakes, but we can work through this. For the children. Tyler looked between his parents, confusion evident. Dad, why can't Mom stay? She said she was sorry. Connor knelt beside his son. Tyler, some mistakes can't be fixed by saying sorry. Your mother chose Dylan over our family. She chose to lie to you about me, and she chose to let a criminal live in our home with you and Emma. But she didn't know Dylan was a criminal, Emma protested. She knew he was married to another woman, Connor replied. She knew taking money from him was wrong. She knew turning you against me was cruel. Those weren't mistakes, they were choices. Lauren stood shakily. Connor, I was lonely and scared. You were gone so much, and Dylan made me feel special. He promised to take care of us. By destroying another man's family. By stealing from his own wife. By targeting military spouses specifically. Connor's voice remained level, But ice crept into his tone. You weren't his first victim, Lauren. You were just the most convenient. Torres stepped forward with a tablet. Mrs. Walsh, we need to show you something. The screen displayed photographs of 3 other women, all military spouses, all previous targets of Dylan's scheme. Each photo showed the same progression: expensive gifts, home renovations, children bonding with Dylan, and ultimately, financial ruin when Dylan's criminal activities surfaced. Jessica Reed, Dylan's wife, tried to warn you. Torres continued. She called your house twice in March. Dylan told you she was crazy and jealous, but she was trying to protect you. Lauren stared at the photos, recognition dawning. The woman who called asking for Dylan. She said she was his wife, but Dylan said she was lying. She wasn't lying. Dylan has been separated from Jessica for 8 months, but never divorced. Your relationship with him was adultery on both sides. Emma looked confused. What does that mean? Connor answered. It means Dylan was cheating on his wife with your mother, and your mother was cheating on me with Dylan. Both of them broke their marriage promises. Tyler's young face scrunched in concentration. So Dylan lied to us too? About many things, Connor confirmed. He lied about me abandoning you. He lied about being single. He lied about his business being legal. He used lies to turn you against me and make your mother depend on him. Lauren collapsed into a chair. I thought he loved me. He said he wanted to marry me after the divorce. Torres shook her head. Mrs. Walsh, Dylan had no intention of marrying you. We found evidence that he was already planning to target another military spouse, Captain Maria Gonzalez, whose husband is currently deployed in Korea. The revelation hit Lauren like physical blow. Everything she'd sacrificed, her marriage, her children's respect for their father, her integrity, had been for a lie. Dylan had never loved her. She'd been another mark in his predatory scheme. I need to show you one more thing, Torres said, producing another tablet. Security footage from Dylan's office. The video showed Dylan talking to another man in what appeared to be a casual conversation. The audio was clear. The military wife thing is perfect. Dylan's voice came through the speakers. They're desperate, grateful for attention, and they have access to benefits and pensions. Plus, the husbands are gone for months at a time. What about Lauren? The other man asked. She's useful for now. Good with the kids, doesn't ask too many questions about money. When the divorce is final and I can access the husband's pension, I'll move on to the next one. Lauren gasped, her hand covering her mouth. Emma and Tyler stared at the screen in shock, finally understanding the magnitude of Dylan's deception. He never loved any of us, Emma whispered. Connor felt no satisfaction in his family's pain, but vindication burned in his chest. Dylan hadn't just stolen his wife. He'd systematically manipulated and exploited her vulnerabilities for financial gain. Lauren had been a victim, but she'd also been a willing participant in destroying their family. Mom, Tyler said quietly, did you really tell Dylan that Dad didn't love us? Lauren's tears fell harder. I was angry and hurt. Dylan said things that made me feel like Connor cared more about the army than about us. But you believed him instead of believing Dad, Emma said, her young voice carrying unexpected wisdom. Lauren nodded miserably. I believed what I wanted to hear instead of what was true. Connor stood, his decision crystallizing. Agent Torres, what happens now with the custody situation? That's between you and Mrs. Walsh. The FBI investigation doesn't impact family court decisions about the children. Connor looked at Lauren, who stared at him with desperate hope. Connor, please. I know I hurt you, but I never stopped loving you. We can rebuild. We can make this work. No, Connor said quietly. We can't. But the children need both parents. The children need stability and truth, Connor interrupted. They need to understand that actions have consequences, and they need to see that betrayal isn't forgiven just because someone says sorry. Lauren stood shakily. You're punishing me. I'm protecting my family from someone who chose to destroy it. Connor's voice remained calm, but his words cut like surgical instruments. You made your choice, Lauren. Now you live with the consequences. Emma looked between her parents. Dad, does this mean you and Mom will never get back together? Connor knelt beside his daughter. Emma, some things can't be repaired once they're broken. Your mother chose Dylan over our family. That choice has consequences that last forever. As FBI agents continued cataloging evidence and preparing to escort Lauren from the house, Connor realized that revealing Dylan's true nature was only the first step. Lauren's betrayal ran deeper than adultery. She'd systematically poisoned his children against him while building a life with a criminal. Forgiveness wasn't possible. Justice wasn't complete. The war would continue until everyone who'd betrayed him understood the full price of their treachery. Chapter 6. The Deeper Game. 2 weeks after Dylan's arrest, Connor discovered the betrayal ran even deeper than adultery and fraud. He sat in his home office, surrounded by documents that painted a picture of systematic deception spanning not just months, but years. Emma and Tyler were at school, adjusting slowly to their new reality. Lauren had moved into a small apartment across town, surviving on the modest income from her part-time job at a medical office. Dylan remained in federal custody, his bail denied after prosecutors demonstrated he was a flight risk with offshore accounts and false identities. But Connor's military intelligence training had taught him to dig beneath surface explanations. Something about the timeline bothered him. Dylan's targeting of Lauren seemed too precise, too well-informed about Connor's deployment schedule and family vulnerabilities. The answer came from an unexpected source. Master Sergeant Rick Holloway, Connor's longtime friend and fellow intelligence specialist, called with disturbing news. "Connor, you need to see something," Rick said over the secure line. "Meet me at the usual place in 30 minutes. They met at a truck stop outside Charlotte, away from potential surveillance. Rick handed Connor a thick folder. "Dylan Reed had inside information about your deployment timeline, your family's financial situation, and your marriage problems," Rick said grimly. Someone with access to military personnel records was feeding him intelligence. Connor opened the folder, finding classified documents that should never have left secure facilities. His deployment orders, family contact information, psychological evaluation reports, and financial records, all stamped with access logs showing when and who had retrieved them. "Who?" Connor asked, though ice was already forming in his stomach. "Staff Sergeant Marcus Webb, your wife's brother." The revelation hit Connor like incoming artillery. Marcus Webb, Lauren's younger brother, had been Connor's groomsman and Tyler's godfather. Marcus worked in personnel administration at Fort Bragg, with access to exactly the kind of records Dylan would need to target military families effectively. "How long?" Connor asked. 18 months. Webb started pulling records on deployed personnel with marital problems. He'd identify vulnerable families, provide target packages to Reed, and receive payment for each successful operation. Connor studied the documents, seeing the conspiracy clearly now. This wasn't random adultery. It was a coordinated attack on military families, with Lauren's own brother serving as intelligence coordinator. Marcus knew about Lauren's affair from the beginning. He facilitated it. Webb identified you as a target, provided Reed with your family's psychological profiles and financial vulnerabilities, and helped plan the timeline for maximum family destruction. Connor felt rage building like a nuclear reaction. Lauren hadn't just stumbled into Dylan's arms. She'd been set up by her own brother, who'd betrayed both his military oath and his family loyalty for money. "How many families has Marcus compromised?" Rick's expression darkened. 17, that we can prove. Reed's entire operation depended on inside information about deployment schedules, family stress factors, and financial situations. Marcus was the key to everything. Connor closed the folder, his mind already working through implications. Lauren had been targeted, manipulated, and used by Dylan, but her brother Marcus had orchestrated the entire scheme. The betrayal was exponentially worse than adultery. It was treason disguised as family destruction. Where's Marcus now? Still at Fort Bragg, still pulling records. We've been watching him for 2 weeks, building a case. But Connor, there's something else. Rick hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with what came next. Lauren knew. The words hung in the air like smoke from an explosion. Connor stared at his friend, processing the final betrayal. She knew Marcus was involved? Not initially. But she found out 6 months ago when Marcus got drunk and bragged about how much money he was making from Dylan. Lauren confronted him, and he admitted everything. Connor felt the last pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. She stayed with Dylan anyway. Not only stayed, she helped. Lauren provided Marcus with updates about your emotional state during phone calls home, information about your return timeline, and details about your financial concerns. She became an active participant in the intelligence gathering. The revelation shattered Connor's last illusions about his wife's innocence. Lauren hadn't been manipulated or victimized. She'd been a willing participant in a scheme designed to destroy military families for profit. Her brother had targeted Connor, but Lauren had provided the ammunition. Does she know we're onto Marcus? Not yet. We wanted to brief you first. Connor stood, his mind shifting into operational mode. The scope of betrayal was breathtaking. His wife, her brother, and Dylan had formed a conspiracy specifically designed to destroy his family and steal his military benefits. They'd treated his children as assets to be acquired and his service record as intelligence to be exploited. I want to confront Marcus personally before you arrest him, Connor said. Rick shook his head. Connor, you know that's not. I want to look him in the eye when he realizes his entire operation has been exposed. I want him to understand that betraying military families has consequences. The investigation needs to follow proper channels. The investigation has what it needs, Connor interrupted. You said you've been watching for 2 weeks. You have documented evidence of 17 compromised families. Marcus Webb is finished either way. Rick studied Connor's face, recognizing the cold determination that had made him effective in hostile territories. 1 hour, Rick said finally. We'll arrange for you to visit Marcus at Fort Bragg under the pretext of discussing family issues related to Lauren's situation. But Connor, no violence. We need him intact for prosecution. Connor nodded, but his smile was arctic. I won't lay a hand on him. That afternoon, Connor sat across from Marcus Webb in a private office at Fort Bragg. Marcus looked nervous but tried to project friendly concern. Connor, man, I'm so sorry about Lauren and this whole Dylan situation, Marcus said. I had no idea she was involved with such a scumbag. Connor studied Marcus's face, noting the micro-expressions his training had taught him to recognize. Forced sincerity masking guilt. Practiced lies delivered with apparent concern. Marcus was performing, just like Dylan had performed in the coffee shop. It's been devastating, Connor replied. Learning that people you trust have been lying to you, manipulating your family, stealing your future. Marcus nodded sympathetically. Dylan really fooled everyone. Even Lauren thought he was legitimate. Did she? Connor leaned forward slightly. Because I've learned some interesting things about Dylan's operation. Apparently, he had inside information about military families, deployment schedules, financial records, psychological profiles. Marcus's face went pale, but he maintained his act. Really? How would he get that kind of information? Connor placed a folder on the desk between them. From someone with access to military personnel records. Someone who could identify vulnerable families and provide target packages for a predator like Dylan. Marcus stared at the folder but didn't reach for it. His hands trembled slightly as he processed the implications. Connor, I don't know what you're suggesting. I'm not suggesting anything, Connor interrupted. I'm telling you that your entire operation has been exposed. 17 military families destroyed for profit. Your sister used as bait to steal military benefits. My children turned against me as part of a criminal conspiracy. Marcus started to stand, but Connor's voice stopped him. Sit down, Marcus. We're not finished. The authority in Connor's tone, 20 years of military command, compelled obedience. Marcus sat heavily, his facade crumbling. You targeted your own sister's husband, Connor continued. You provided Dylan with intelligence about my deployment timeline, my family's vulnerabilities, and my financial situation. You helped him systematically destroy my marriage and turn my children against me. Connor, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. Connor opened the folder, revealing classified documents with Marcus's access signatures. Dylan paid you $50,000 over 18 months to destroy military families. Your sister was just another target. Marcus stared at the evidence, his breathing becoming rapid and shallow. You can't prove. Staff Sergeant Webb, you're under arrest for espionage, conspiracy to commit fraud, and violation of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. Military police entered the office from both doors, surrounding Marcus with practiced efficiency. As they read his rights and applied handcuffs, Marcus looked at Connor with desperate eyes. Connor, please. Lauren didn't know. She's innocent in this. Connor stood slowly, his expression arctic. Lauren knew 6 months ago, Marcus. She chose to continue the operation anyway. She's as guilty as you are. As they led Marcus away, Connor felt a cold satisfaction settling in his chest. The conspiracy against his family had been more extensive and malicious than he'd imagined, but it was also more vulnerable than the conspirators had realized. Lauren, Dylan, and Marcus had underestimated the skills Connor had developed in 2 decades of military service. They'd forgotten that he was trained to identify threats, gather intelligence, and neutralize enemies permanently. The war wasn't over. In fact, it was about to escalate beyond anything his enemies had imagined possible. Chapter 7. The Reckoning begins. Connor sat in his truck outside Lauren's apartment complex, watching his estranged wife through her kitchen window. She moved mechanically, preparing dinner alone in the cramped space that had become her world since Dylan's arrest. Her phone buzzed constantly, reporters, attorneys, creditors, and collection agencies calling about Dylan's seized assets. But Lauren didn't know about Marcus yet. She didn't know that her brother's arrest 3 hours earlier had exposed her own complicity in the conspiracy. She believed her role as victim was still credible. Connor's phone contained 17 text messages from Lauren over the past week, each more desperate than the last. Connor, please let me see the kids this weekend. I know you're angry, but we need to talk about our family. Emma asked if I'm coming to her school play. Can we make arrangements? The FBI says Dylan's victims might get some money back. Maybe we can start over. Connor hadn't responded to any of them. Let Lauren believe reconciliation was possible. Let her hope that Connor's silence indicated forgiveness rather than planning. She would understand the full scope of her situation soon enough. Emma and Tyler were staying with Connor's parents in Virginia for the weekend, giving Connor freedom to execute the next phase of his plan. His children had suffered enough trauma watching their family implode. They didn't need to witness what came next. Connor entered Lauren's apartment building using the security code she'd given him weeks earlier when she'd still hoped for reconciliation. He climbed to the 3rd floor and knocked on apartment 3B. Lauren opened the door, her face lighting with desperate hope. Connor, I wasn't expecting. We need to talk, Connor said, stepping inside without invitation. Lauren's apartment was a study in fallen circumstances. Discount furniture, thrift store clothing, and generic groceries reflected her new financial reality. The woman who'd lived in luxury just months earlier now counted every dollar. I'm so glad you came, Lauren said, closing the door. I've been thinking about us, about the family. Maybe we can. Sit down, Lauren. Something in Connor's tone made Lauren's hopeful expression falter. She sat on her second-hand couch, wrapping her arms around herself defensively. Connor remained standing, dominating the small space with his presence. Marcus was arrested this afternoon. Lauren's face went white. What? Espionage. Conspiracy to commit fraud. Computer crimes. He's been feeding military intelligence to Dylan Reed for 18 months, helping target vulnerable military families for financial exploitation. Lauren's mouth opened and closed wordlessly. She stared at Connor as the implication sank in. You knew, Connor continued. Marcus told you 6 months ago when he was drunk. You knew your brother was betraying military families, including ours. You knew Dylan's operation was based on stolen classified information. Connor, you helped. Connor's voice cut through her attempted denial. You provided Marcus with intelligence about my emotional state during phone calls. You gave him updates about my deployment timeline. You fed information into a conspiracy designed to destroy our family. Lauren stood shakily. I didn't understand. You understood perfectly. Connor stepped closer, his presence intimidating in the confined space. You knew Dylan was using stolen military intelligence to target soldiers' families. You knew he was still married. You knew he was using you to get access to my military benefits. And you chose to participate anyway. Lauren backed against the wall, tears streaming down her face. Connor, please. I was confused and lonely. Marcus said you didn't love us anymore. Marcus said what Dylan paid him to say. Connor's voice remained deadly calm. Your brother sold intelligence that helped Dylan identify you as a target. Then you helped provide the information needed to destroy our marriage. But I love you, Lauren whispered desperately. I know I made mistakes, but we can work through this. For the children. Connor studied his wife's face. The woman he'd married 8 years earlier, who'd promised to love and honor him through deployments and hardship. She looked smaller now, diminished by the weight of her choices. Lauren, you turned my children against me. You let a criminal live in our home. You helped your brother betray 17 military families. You participated in a conspiracy that treated military service members as targets to be exploited. I didn't think. You didn't care, Connor interrupted. You cared about expensive furniture and private schools and feeling important. You cared about Dylan's money and attention. You didn't care that it came from destroying other families. Lauren slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. What do you want from me? I've lost everything. Dylan's gone. Marcus is arrested. The kids barely speak to me. What more can you take? Connor knelt to her eye level, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Everything. Lauren looked up through her tears. What? I'm going to take everything, Lauren. Your job, your apartment, your reputation, your relationship with Emma and Tyler. I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what you did to military families. I'm going to ensure you understand the full consequences of betraying people who serve their country. Lauren's eyes widened in terror. Connor, you can't. I've already started. Connor stood, towering over his crying wife. Your employer received an anonymous tip about your involvement in a federal conspiracy. The background check they're running will reveal your role in Marcus and Dylan's operation. No, Lauren whispered. Your landlord received information about your connection to seized criminal assets. Your lease will be terminated for providing false information on your rental application. Lauren tried to stand but stumbled. Connor, please. The parents at Emma and Tyler's school have been informed that you helped a criminal gain access to their community and put their children at risk. You're destroying me, Lauren gasped. Connor's smile was arctic. You destroyed yourself. I'm just making sure everyone understands what you chose to do. Lauren crawled to Connor's feet, grasping at his legs desperately. Connor, I'll do anything. I'll confess everything to the FBI. I'll testify against Marcus and Dylan. I'll sign away all custody rights. Just please don't. Don't what? Connor stepped back from her touch. Don't let people know who you really are. Don't make you face consequences for your choices. I'm begging you, Lauren sobbed. I know I hurt you, but please don't destroy me completely. Connor looked down at his wife, the mother of his children, the woman he'd once promised to protect and cherish. She looked broken and pathetic, reduced to begging for mercy she'd never shown their family. Lauren, Connor said quietly, you had 18 months to consider consequences. You chose Dylan's money over our marriage. You chose Marcus's lies over your husband's service. You chose to help destroy 17 military families for personal gain. He moved toward the door, pausing at the threshold. Now you get to live with those choices. Forever. Connor left Lauren sobbing on her apartment floor, her desperate pleas echoing in the hallway behind him. Phase 2 of his plan was complete. Lauren now understood that her betrayal had consequences extending far beyond divorce court. But Connor wasn't finished. Dylan, Marcus, and Lauren had declared war on his family. They would learn that Staff Sergeant Connor Walsh never forgot a betrayal and never showed mercy to enemies. The final phase would be the most brutal of all. Chapter 8, Total Warfare. 6 months after Marcus's arrest, Connor stood in the federal courthouse watching his brother-in-law receive a 20-year sentence for espionage and conspiracy. Marcus had aged dramatically during his incarceration, his face gaunt, his military bearing replaced by the hunched posture of defeat. Lauren sat in the gallery behind the prosecution table, one of 17 military spouses who testified about the devastating impact of Marcus and Dylan's conspiracy. She'd lost 30 pounds. Her hair hung limp and unwashed, and her clothes were clearly secondhand. The prosecution had granted her immunity in exchange for testimony, but immunity from federal charges couldn't protect her from Connor's systematic destruction of her life. Dylan had already been sentenced to 25 years for money laundering, fraud, and operating an illegal gambling enterprise. His wife Jessica had divorced him and received custody of their children. The 3 other military spouses he'd targeted were rebuilding their lives with support from victim services. But Connor wasn't satisfied with federal justice. Prison sentences were temporary. Dylan and Marcus would eventually be released. Lauren had avoided criminal charges entirely. None of them had truly paid for the psychological warfare they'd waged against military families. As court adjourned, Connor followed Lauren into the parking garage. She walked slowly, defeated by months of systematic destruction Connor had orchestrated with military precision. Lauren, Connor called. She turned, her face showing the hollow-eyed exhaustion of someone who'd lost everything. Connor, I didn't expect to see you here. I wanted to watch Marcus get sentenced. 20 years seems appropriate for betraying 17 military families. Lauren nodded wearily. I testified against him. I told them everything, like you said I should. Connor studied his estranged wife's appearance. Her job at the medical office had ended when her role in the conspiracy became public. Her apartment lease had been terminated when the landlord learned about her connection to seized criminal assets. She'd been living in her car for the past month, showering at truck stops and eating from food banks. "How are Emma and Tyler?" Lauren asked desperately. "I haven't seen them in weeks." "They're doing well. Emma made honor roll, and Tyler joined the football team. They're adjusting to life without toxic influences." Lauren flinched at the implication. "Connor, I know you hate me, but they're my children too. Can't we arrange?" "Supervised visitation was part of our divorce agreement," Connor interrupted. "But you'd need stable housing and employment to qualify. You'd also need to pass psychological evaluation and demonstrate you're not a threat to their well-being. You know I can't meet those requirements while you're—" Lauren stopped herself. "While I'm what?" Lauren looked around the empty parking garage, confirming they were alone. "While you're destroying every opportunity try to rebuild. Every job application gets rejected after background checks. Every apartment application gets denied. Every attempt to start over gets sabotaged." Connor's expression remained neutral. "Are you suggesting I'm interfering with your attempts to find employment and housing?" "I'm not suggesting anything," Lauren said bitterly. "I'm telling you directly. You're systematically destroying my life." "No, Lauren. You destroyed your life. I'm just making sure you understand the consequences." Lauren's composure finally cracked. "Connor, please. I've lost everything. My job, my home, my children, my brother. I sleep in my car and eat at soup kitchens. What more do you want?" Connor stepped closer, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "I want you to understand what you did to 17 military families. I want you to experience the desperation and helplessness you helped create. I want you to know what it feels like when someone systematically destroys everything you care about." "I've learned," Lauren pleaded. "I understand now. I know what I did was wrong." "Do you?" Connor's smile was predatory. "Because I don't think you've learned anything yet." Lauren backed against her car, a 10-year-old Honda with over 200,000 miles and rust eating through the wheel wells. "What do you mean?" Connor pulled out his phone and showed Lauren a series of photographs. Her face went white as she recognized the images. "These were taken at the truck stop where you've been showering," Connor said. "Interesting how often you've been approached by men offering money for companionship." Lauren's hands shook as she stared at the photos. "Those men approached me. I never." "Of course you didn't," Connor agreed. "But the photos could be interpreted differently by someone who didn't know the full context." "You're going to." "I'm going to make sure Emma and Tyler understand what their mother has become," Connor said calmly. "They should know that the woman who claims to love them is living like a prostitute in truck stop parking lots." Lauren collapsed against her car, sobbing hysterically. "Connor, please. Don't show those to my children. I'll do anything you want." "You'll do anything I want anyway," Connor replied. "Because you have no other options." Lauren looked up through her tears, seeing something in Connor's expression that terrified her more than federal prison or homelessness. "What do you want?" Connor knelt to her eye level, speaking quietly but with unmistakable authority. "I want you to disappear, Lauren. I want you to leave Charlotte, leave North Carolina, and never contact me or my children again." "They're my children too," Lauren whispered. "No," Connor said firmly. "They're my children. You're the woman who helped criminals target their father for destruction. You're the person who chose money and attention over family loyalty. You lost the right to call them your children when you betrayed them." Lauren stared at Connor, finally understanding the full scope of his plan. He hadn't just wanted to punish her. He'd wanted to completely erase her from their lives. "If I leave," Lauren said slowly, "will you stop? Will you let me try to build something somewhere else?" Connor considered the question. "If you leave tonight and never return, I'll stop actively destroying your opportunities." "But Lauren, if you ever try to contact Emma or Tyler, if you ever attempt to return to their lives, I'll finish what I started." "What does that mean?" Connor's smile was arctic. "It means you'll discover there are worse things than living in your car and showering at truck stops." Lauren understood. Connor wasn't just threatening continued harassment. He was promising escalation to levels she couldn't imagine. "I need to say goodbye to my children," Lauren pleaded. "No," Connor stood. "You need to leave. Tonight. And you need to never look back." Connor walked toward his truck, pausing at the driver's door. "Lauren, the photographs of you at truck stops, I have dozens of them. Video recordings too. If you ever try to claim I'm an unfit father or attempt to regain custody, Those images will become public record. Lauren slumped against her car as Connor drove away, finally understanding that her war against military families had consequences that would last forever. She'd chosen betrayal over loyalty, and now she would spend the rest of her life paying the price. Connor had given her a choice: disappear voluntarily or be destroyed completely. For Lauren, it wasn't really a choice at all. That night, Lauren's Honda disappeared from Charlotte. She left no forwarding address, no contact information, and no trace of where she'd gone. Emma and Tyler asked about their mother occasionally, but Connor told them she'd chosen to start a new life somewhere else. The children adjusted, as children do. They began calling Connor's parents Grandma and Grandpa without qualifiers. They stopped asking when Mom was coming home. Their world stabilized around the only parent who'd never betrayed them. Connor had won completely, but victory felt cold and empty. He'd protected his family by destroying his wife, but the cost had been his own capacity for mercy or forgiveness. In the quiet moments before sleep, Connor sometimes wondered if he'd become the monster his enemies had painted him as. But then he remembered 17 military families destroyed by people he'd trusted, and he felt no regret. Some betrayals were unforgivable. Some wars ended only with total victory. Chapter 9. No Redemption. 2 years had passed since Lauren's disappearance. Emma, now 15, had grown into a confident young woman who excelled in academics and soccer. Tyler, 13, showed natural leadership abilities and talked about following his father into military service. Both children had adapted to life without their mother, their memories of her gradually fading like old photographs. Connor had received promotions and commendations for his work exposing the military intelligence leak that had enabled Dylan's operation. The Army had implemented new security protocols based on his recommendations, and he'd been assigned to a cybersecurity unit that kept him stateside. His career flourished while his family healed. But on a cold February morning, Connor's carefully constructed peace was shattered by a phone call. "Dad." Emma's voice was shaky. "There's a woman at school who says she's our mother." Connor was in his truck and speeding toward the high school within minutes. He called the principal's office, identifying himself and demanding that no one be allowed to approach or remove his children. Lauren stood in the visitor's parking lot, looking dramatically different from the broken woman who'd left Charlotte 2 years earlier. She'd gained healthy weight, her hair was professionally styled, and she wore expensive business attire. A late-model Mercedes sat behind her. Someone had funded her transformation. "Connor," Lauren smiled as he approached. "You look well." Connor positioned himself between Lauren and the school building. "You were told never to return." "I was told a lot of things," Lauren replied calmly. "But circumstances change." "I've changed." Connor studied Lauren's appearance, noting the confidence in her posture and the expensive accessories. Someone with significant resources had invested in her transformation. "Who's backing you?" Lauren's smile widened. "I've found new friends who understand what you did to me. People who believe military families should be protected from abusive spouses like you." Connor felt ice forming in his chest. "Explain." "I've been working with the Military Family Justice Foundation," Lauren said. "They help military spouses who've been abandoned, abused, and systematically destroyed by controlling husbands. My story has become quite compelling." Connor processed this information rapidly. Someone had weaponized Lauren's victimhood narrative, transforming her from criminal co-conspirator into poster child for military spouse abuse. "I've written a book," Lauren continued. "It's being published next month, Destroyed by Service: How Military Culture Enables Domestic Abuse. I detail how you systematically destroyed my life, denied me access to our children, and used your military connections to ruin my reputation." Connor's jaw tightened. "Your reputation was ruined by your own choices." "Was it?" Lauren pulled out her phone, showing Connor a professionally produced website. "Because my new friends see a different story. They see a military wife who had an affair during a difficult period, then was psychologically tortured and financially destroyed by a vengeful husband who used military resources for personal revenge." The website was sophisticated, featuring Lauren's transformation story, testimonials from other abused military spouses, and donation buttons for the Military Family Justice Foundation. Lauren had been repackaged as a survivor rather than a co-conspirator. "The foundation has hired attorneys," Lauren continued. "We're filing for emergency custody modification based on new evidence of your psychological abuse and manipulation. We're also pursuing federal civil rights violations for your use of military resources to destroy a civilian. Connor realized Lauren's disappearance hadn't been defeat. It had been strategic withdrawal. She'd spent 2 years building a new narrative with professional help, transforming herself from criminal accomplice into victim advocate. Emma and Tyler know the truth about what you did, Connor said. Do they? Lauren's expression turned predatory. Because they were children when their family fell apart. Children who only heard their father's version of events. But now they're old enough to understand that sometimes parents lie to protect themselves. Connor's phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Dad, there are news cameras at school. People are saying you abused Mom. What's happening? Lauren noticed Connor checking his phone. The media loves stories about military families torn apart by abuse. My book publisher arranged interviews with 3 major networks. The story goes national tomorrow morning. Connor understood the full scope of Lauren's new strategy. She wasn't trying to rebuild her old life. She was constructing a new identity as victim advocate while simultaneously destroying Connor's reputation and military career. You won't win, Connor said quietly. I already have, Lauren replied. My attorneys have documented evidence of your systematic harassment, financial manipulation, and psychological abuse. Military Family Justice Foundation has connections throughout DoD and Congress. Your career is over, Connor. Connor studied Lauren's confident expression, recognizing the same predatory smile she'd worn when she'd thought Dylan's money could buy her a new life. She'd found new sponsors for her schemes, new resources to fund her attacks on military families. Lauren, Connor said carefully, you're making the same mistake you made with Dylan. You're trusting people who are using you for their own agenda. These people understand me, Lauren replied. They've helped me heal from the trauma you inflicted. They've helped you construct a lie, Connor corrected. And when that lie serves its purpose, they'll discard you just like Dylan did. Lauren's confidence flickered momentarily. You're trying to manipulate me again. I'm trying to warn you, Connor interrupted. Because Emma and Tyler will learn the truth eventually. When they understand that you've spent 2 years constructing lies about their father instead of trying to rebuild a relationship with them, they'll never forgive you. They'll understand that I fought for them, Lauren said, but her voice lacked conviction. Connor stepped closer, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Lauren, you have one chance to walk away from this. Take your book deal, take your foundation sponsors, and disappear again. Because if you try to destroy my family a second time, I won't show the mercy I showed you before. Lauren's eyes widened slightly. Are you threatening me? I'm promising you, Connor replied. You learn what I'm capable of when someone betrays my family. Don't make me demonstrate what I'm capable of when someone attacks my children directly. Lauren backed toward her Mercedes, some of her confidence evaporating. The foundation has lawyers, Connor. They have media connections and political influence. You can't intimidate me anymore. Connor's smile was arctic. Your foundation friends don't know who they're dealing with. But they're going to learn. As Lauren drove away, Connor's phone rang. Rick Holloway's voice was tense. Connor, we've got a problem. Someone's been making inquiries about your military record, your deployments, and your family situation. Professional inquiries with serious backing. Military Family Justice Foundation, Connor replied. Lauren's back with new sponsors. Jesus, what's your play? Connor watched Lauren's Mercedes disappear into traffic, his mind already shifting into operational mode. Find out who's really behind this foundation. Find out who's funding Lauren's transformation. And find out what they want. And if they're legitimate advocates for military families. Connor's expression hardened. Then they won't mind scrutiny of their methods and funding sources. As Connor walked back toward the school to collect his children, he realized the war wasn't over. Lauren had simply changed tactics, finding new allies who shared her desire to destroy military families. But she'd made one critical error. She'd returned to a battlefield where Connor held every advantage. The final battle was beginning, and this time, Connor wouldn't show mercy to anyone who threatened his family. Lauren, her foundation sponsors, and anyone who supported their attack on military families would learn that some enemies never stop fighting. The reckoning was complete, but the war would continue until every threat to his family was permanently neutralized. In the end, Connor Walsh had won completely, but victory had transformed him into something harder and colder than the man who'd returned from deployment 2 years earlier. He'd protected his family by becoming ruthless, but the cost was his own humanity. Emma and Tyler were safe, but they would grow up knowing their father was capable of destroying anyone who threatened them. Lauren had learned too late that some betrayals carry consequences that last forever. Her attempts at redemption were just new forms of the same selfishness that had destroyed her family originally. She would spend the rest of her life paying for choices that seemed profitable at the time, but cost her everything that mattered. Some wars end with reconciliation. Others end with total victory. Connor Walsh had chosen victory, and he would live with that choice for the rest of his life. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.